Welcome to Out as a New Win, You Have a Purpose podcast. I'm Johnny G, and today I get to sit with the amazing Christin Day. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we're talking about mental health and how important it is, no matter who you are and what you may have gone through in your life and where you have come to today. And I love that you told me that you wanted to share your story.
Absolutely.
So I would love for you to just let everybody know what you have gone through, where you were, what you've gone through, and the resilience of what you pushed through to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so gosh, like it's like sharing my ESH in an AA meeting, you know, like I go and I get to share you know, what it was like and what it's like now. And growing up, like I was a military brat. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot. You know, I'd get comfortable, we'd move around, get comfortable,
Sure.
we'd move around. And my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 8, and I moved with my mom for a little bit, and then you know, growing up it was rough. Like my mom got married at a young age, so she didn't get to be an adult, you know.
Right.
So she would bring random guys home from the bar, and I'm like, oh, you're not my dad. I don't have to listen to you, you know. And I'd cause a lot of chaos, and I'd run these guys out of the house. And my mom's like, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. I want to go live with my dad, you know. And I'd go and live with my dad. And my dad started a new life with his wife and kids. And me and my stepmom, we bumped heads a lot, you know. You're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you
Sure.
kind of stuff. And I'd go back and forth, and I'd manipulate the situation, you know. You're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you. I want to go back to my mom's house, and my mom wouldn't, you know, let me come back, and it was just constant chaos back and forth so much. I moved out here to Arizona in '96, and my mom had breast cancer, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer. She's still alive today, thank God.
That's awesome.
Fought through all that, and so when I moved out here, it was like it was a little, you know, there was a lot of things going on. But I always share in my story, like I can put the drugs and the alcohol down, but men are my number one addiction. And you know, I had daddy issues, you know, so I went from relationship to relationship trying to fill that void. And I started having sex at a young age, and I got pregnant at 14. I had an abortion, and that was really traumatic for me, you know. I ended up going to a teen parenting school downtown, so I would take the bus from 51st Avenue in Union Hills all the way to 3rd Avenue in Roosevelt, and I would take the bus every day. And I'll show my age right now, because back in the day, like hanging out and skipping school,
Yeah.
like Metro
Yeah.
Center was the hangout.
Right.
Yeah, Metro Center no longer exists
Right.
anymore, but you know.
Right.
So we would hang out at Metro Center, and I met a guy when I was like 15. And again, like in my story, I always share, like I drink the water, I get pregnant. You walk by me, I get pregnant. You look at me, I get pregnant. And I ended up getting pregnant at 16 again. So going to my parents, to my mom and my stepdad this time, and like I had just went through the abortion and everything, and going to them and telling them like, hey, I'm pregnant again. Like, what are you going to do?
Right.
You know? And I was adamant about graduating school and going through. So I went to this teen parenting school where I could graduate at my own pace. And I really succeeded. I did good. You know, I went in with freshman credits, and I ended up graduating a year and a half early.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I graduated in '99, and I was 4 months pregnant with my son. The guy that I had met, you know, at Metro Center, like love of my life, and and I want to be with him, and I'm explaining to my parents that this is who I want to be with, and we're gonna do good things, and my parents allowed me to get married. Yeah, so I got married at 16. That was great. Great experience. Very big learning experience.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I had caused so much chaos in my parents' life. My dad was like, "Where do I sign?" You know what I mean? Like I was a hellion. So they signed on my marriage certificate, and I'm pregnant, and I graduate, like I said, a year and a half early, and I'm like, I'm gonna do good things, and I'm gonna bring this baby into the world, and everything's gonna be great, and it just wasn't like that.
Right.
I had some issues, and I ended up having a miscarriage at 6 months, and that was super traumatic to go through at 16.
Yes.
And to deal with that pain, and I started doing drugs and trying to suppress these feelings of like, drinking and doing ecstasy and stuff like that, so that I could, fill that void that I was
Right.
feeling. And on top of that, I found out that my husband had cheated on me. And that really put me in a deep depression. And he ended up joining the military. So he got shipped off. And when he had came back from boot camp is when I found out that he had cheated on me. And I may have taken a butcher knife to objects on his body. I tried to cut his dick off, but I was unsuccessful. And I went crazy, like, how could you do this to me? And like, I'm going through our miscarriage of our son, and we're supposed to be married, and we took vows to be together. And I can remember the cops showing up to the house and are like, how old are you? And I'm like, 16. And the cop's like, oh, Jesus. What type of kid needs to be married
Right.
at that age? And
Right.
granted, like, my parents signed off on it and stuff. So they let me call my parents to come and get me, and I go, and my mom, she comes and she's like, what did you do? I'm like, what did I do? Like, what did he do? It's not my fault, it's his fault. So I go, and I separate from him for a little bit. And I start doing more drugs, just trying to suppress these feelings. He gets shipped off to Fort Hood, and he calls me, and he's like, look, man, like, we're married, like, let's make this work. And at that time I was 17, and I had nothing going here for me.
Right.
I was doing drugs, having sex with random men. Like, it just wasn't healthy at all. And I end up moving to Fort Hood. And it's crazy because I look back now, like when I went to Fort Hood with him. So I was born in Fort Hood. My dad, that's where he was stationed. So, like, going back there 17 years later as a military wife is like, wow.
Especially at 17.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to, like, now granted, like, my parents, there was a lot of shit that went on, and there was a lot of ugly times, but there was a lot of beautiful times too. And like, traveling the world, and like,
Right.
I grew up my first 3 years of my life, like from 1 to 4, I was in Germany. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be this military wife, and we're going to travel the world, and everything's going to be great. And I get pregnant when I get there. And again, in my eyes, like, this baby is going to fix our marriage, and it's
Sure.
going to make everything, it's going to make us be one, and we're going to be great. And it just wasn't like that. I get there, and we get an apartment, and we're doing good. And within 2 months, it's like a total shit show. And I'm stuck in this apartment now, and he goes back to the barracks, and I'm calling my mom, and I'm so devastated. And my mom, like, she's my biggest enabler, but she's like my biggest supporter,
Right.
And I would call her, and, I just want to come home, but I can't come home. You know, I got to fulfill this lease at this apartment, and God knows what this is going to do. Like me being pregnant, I need to be here and go through my doctor's appointments and stuff because it was a high risk pregnancy. And so about 9 months pregnant, I get a phone call from my husband's staff sergeant or the chief of staff. I don't remember what they were called, but my husband had gotten in trouble for doing drugs for the third time, and they dishonorably discharged him. And they don't care if your wife's 9 months pregnant. They take your benefits, her benefits,
Right.
and they're like, bye, you're kicked out. And I'm like calling my mom, like, what do I do? You know, like, so my mom gets on a plane and she comes to Texas, and she gets everything and helps me sell everything in the apartment. I get out of there and I come back to Arizona, and, you know, and I have my son a week later, you know, and I'm in this mind frame like I'm going to be a single mom and everything's going to be great. And it just, you know, everything was great for a little bit. And I did good, and, you know, and for a little while. And then I ended up meeting some people, and I went to college for a little bit. I got a full ride scholarship to ASU West and
Wow.
for elementary education. And I did good, you know, and I was raising my son, and I was working 3 jobs, and I ended up getting introduced to some guys. I lived in Surprise and El Mirage right next door, and they're like, oh, you just take your car and drop it off over here and take this, don't ask questions kind of thing, you know, and we're going to pay you, and you drop your car off down the street, and they unload whatever they did. And for a little while, like, I really didn't know what was going on. I was really naive and stupid to it. But I mean, in the back of my head, I kind of knew, you know.
Right.
And I'm just trying to, you know, make ends meet and be a good mom to my son. Like I said, I was working the 3 jobs, and I was going to college full time, and my parents were really helping me with my kid. And I ended up, you know, I'm tired. Oh, I don't want to go to work that day. And they're like, oh, just do a little bump of this and you'll be fine. And, you know, and before you know it, I'm doing meth every day, and I'm, you know, getting fired from one job, losing another, and quitting one. And my house got raided, and I ended up giving my son up for temporary guardianship to my parents. And yeah, it was crazy.
So
It
now,
all
now
just
you're 18-ish?
18.
Going,
Yeah, I was
going
almost
18, 19, going
Yep.
through all of this.
Yep.
Right? And everything's just compounding on top of each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, like I said, my parents raised my son since he was a year and a half old, and I lost the scholarship, and I was doing meth every day, and my family's like, why can't you get your shit together? And I'm just like, I can't, you know? And I started messing around with the dope man so that I could get free dope, and before you know it, I'm pregnant again. Yeah, life went crazy real quick, and God's got jokes sometimes, and you know, and
I love it.
yeah, so I'm doing meth every day, and now I'm pregnant with this little baby, and I don't know what to do, you know, and I didn't want to have an abortion, like, you know, and I can remember, unfortunately, like, we ask God for help when we need it the most, you know. It's not like, oh, thank you, God, you know. Like me, I asked my God, oh my God, I'm in some shit, can you please get me out of this? And oh my gosh, I'm pregnant and I can't stop doing meth every day, can you please help me get out of this situation?
Right.
And God did for me what I couldn't do for myself, and I ended up getting arrested. I sold 2 ounces of meth to an undercover cop, 6 months pregnant, and I got arrested. And I ended up in Estrella, which was great, you know, to say the least. It's what I needed at that time,
Right.
you know, and And like I said, my mom, my biggest supporter, my biggest enabler, I'm like, oh, my bond's $1,200, you know, she's going to get me out. I'm going to be fine. And no. She started going to these like Al Anon classes and like learning this tough love stuff. And I was like, who is teaching you this? Like, oh my gosh.
Right. How
And
could you do this to me?
right, how
Yeah.
can you do this to
Yeah.
me? And she would like hang up on me and I'd be like devastated, you know, and I'm pregnant in jail and I'm like crying and but it was a good experience. You know, I needed to go through those things. And I remember my parents like coming to the jail and doing visits and stuff. And I'm like, please just get me out of here. Like, I don't want to live like this. I'll do whatever you want. And they're like, no, like, you got to figure this out. You know, and in the back of my head, I'm like, my baby's dad's going to get me out. It's just $120, you know, and he's running and gunning. He could give two shits less about what's going on. So I started, I was dilating while I was in jail, and I was dilated to about 3, and I had some moments where I had to go to the hospital and like they had me shackled and I'm like pregnant, you know, and shackled to the bed and shackled in the ambulance and I'm thinking I'm in labor and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, and so I end up getting out of the hospital and I call my mom and I'm like, please, like I will do anything you want, just please get me out of here. I don't want to have this baby in jail, like I'll do anything. And I find a treatment center and I make a couple phone calls while I'm in jail and I find a treatment center that'll accept me and my daughter. And I get out. My parents bond me out finally, and I go to this treatment center, and I do good, you know. And I have the baby, and this is God working in my life, you know. This baby comes out. She's 3 weeks early, 9 pounds, 22 and a half inches long, and not a trace of meth in her. Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, and she was perfect, you know. I called her my angel baby. Like, there could have been so many different ways that that scenario could have played out.
Oh, for sure.
Because I did do meth till I was 6 months pregnant, you know. Am I proud of it? Absolutely not. But it's part of my story and I don't hide it, you know. And I'm very open and honest with my daughter. So I go on like this whole, you know, I'm at the treatment center and I don't want to be there though. Like, you know, and I'm just doing it to appease my family
Right.
and
You
make
haven't
them
you
happy.
haven't committed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So I'm, you know, I'm just trying to appease the family and shut them up for a little bit. And my mom comes in and she's like, oh, this place is gross. And I was like, yeah, they have bed bugs, you know. And my mom's like, pack your shit, let's go. And I'm like, yes, you know. And I get to go back to mommy and daddy's house, and I bring my daughter, and but the stipulation was I had to go to meetings, and I start going to these meetings, and you know, I'm on this whole like fuck men thing because men are my problem, you know. And I meet this girl in the meetings and like our similar stories, and she's a single mom and she's got a baby too, and we just click, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, maybe men are my problem and I need to become a lesbian, you know. And I'm like, yeah, again, I don't recommend it because women are crazy, you know. I went through the whole lesbian stage for a little while. And we're crazy, you know. I would go to these meetings, and again, it was just to appease my family, you know, to shut them up for a little bit. And I stopped doing meth for a little while, but before you know it, I was doing it again. And my girlfriend, the same thing. Like, she was a stripper, so like we would drop the kids off at the babysitter's house, and I would think like I was leaving my kid for like 12 hours, but I was leaving my kid for like 3 days, you know. And it wasn't just some random person that I was leaving her with. Like, it was a family friend that I've known for like half of my life. And they would call me and be like, hey, like, you're coming to pick the kid up? Like, what's going on? And, you know, I'm like, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And tweaker time, I'm like a day later, you know, 2 days later. And I'd show up and she's like, "What's going on? Like, talk to me." And I'm like, "Listen, this little girl is getting in the way of me getting high, and I can't give her the
Right.
life that she deserves." And and I look back at it now, and I at first, like when I got back into sobriety, like I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, that I chose men and I chose drugs over my kids. In this specific situation, like I gave that little girl the best chance of living a life beyond her wildest dreams. She's 19, or she's going to be 19 in December. I have a relationship with her. I asked them to adopt her, and it was an open adoption. So she knows that I'm her mom,
Right.
and I've gotten to be there and to watch her grow up as her mom. But she has two moms, she says. And it's so funny because her adopted parents are a huge part of my recovery too. I don't know that I would be where I am today if it wasn't for them helping me and opening the doors for me and
Awesome.
allowing me to not just be there for her, but when I was going through my own addiction, like, "Hey, why don't you get away from this guy that's beating the shit out of you, and why don't you come here and get your head on straight?" So like I said, she's going to be 19. Super freaking awesome. I got to watch her graduate high school, and I got to take her to get her driver's license and all those good things,
Right.
So back to the whole lesbian thing, girlfriend's the stripper, and she's disappearing for hours on hours in the bathroom, and I'm like, "Bust out, I know what you're doing." And I start doing meth every day again. And the strip club scene is not a very pretty scene, and but we made it work. She stripped. I sat in the back, held all of her money, and we would con guys into thinking that they were going to get a 2-for-1, and I'd rob them for everything they had. Get them a little drunk and take their credit cards and all kinds of stuff, and I meet this guy, and he's 45, and I'm 23, and he's the love of my life, and they're all the love of my life. It's the same story over and over.
There's a pattern.
Yes, total pattern. And he's tattoos and a biker, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm not a lesbian. I want to be with this guy." And I drop the stripper, and I go with this guy, and I start getting my life together a little bit, and I stop doing drugs, and I get pregnant and all that good stuff. And again, this is my third child I'm going to bring into the world,
Right.
but I go into this mind frame of I'm going to be the best mom that I can be, and I'm going to give this baby the best life possible. And he, like I said, he was a tattoo artist and he owned a tattoo shop in California. So he would go home on the weekends, check on the tattoo shop, so he said. And he was going home to check on the wife and kids. And my men picker was really bad then, So, man, I went through it. And again, now I'm pregnant, and none of my children's dads were in their lives, and that was really messed up. It was hard growing up and raising children and not having their kids and, their dads in their lives. So I end up going to my daughter that I gave up for adoption. I go to her parents' house, and they allow me to live there until I get on my feet and I start doing good, and I get an apartment and I'm doing good, and then I meet a guy, and of course 2 months later it's the love of my life and we're going to get married, and it was craziness, insanity. I get married after 2 months, and this guy, he raises my daughter like his own, and we were together until she was about 6-7 years old, and again, very, very toxic. We went through the whole drug stage for a little bit, and I'm going to get off of drugs and I'm just going to take pain pills. And then, oh, I'm going to get off the pain pills, so I'm going to do Suboxone. And I did Suboxone maintenance for a little bit, and that was absolutely, you get these doctors that'll give you 4 Suboxone strips or 4 Suboxone pills of 8 milligrams a day, and I was abusing it, and in my delusional mind, like, oh, I'm gonna do a little bit of meth because it's gonna help me get the monkey off my back, and I'm gonna be okay, and it just wasn't. Him and I ended up getting a divorce, and I went to relationship after relationship, and I'm dragging my kid through all this,
Sure.
this kid that I swore up and down I was going to give the best life possible, and I just I didn't, and she's seen a lot of stuff that she didn't need to see, and in 2015 I got introduced to the needle, and I got introduced to heroin, and it was on and popping from there. I lost the house, the car, the kid within 32 days of sticking a needle in my arm. And because I didn't have the other 2 children and stuff like that, when my sister had put in for emergency custody of my daughter, the judge just stamped approval, No looking into it, no nothing.
Right.
So now I have this whole DCS case that I'm fighting, and I'm exhausted.
Thank you so much for joining us for part 1. We will see you soon for part 2 of Out is the New In, You Have a Purpose podcast.